Hey guys, this is Isaac from Contender Bicycles, and here with me today is the Scott Genius. We also have the Scott Genius ST. What's the difference between the two? When Scott launched the new Genius, they launched two versions of it, the Genius and the Genius ST. This was kind of confusing for some people. Most of the time when a company launches a bike platform that has an ST and a standard version, the ST usually stands for short travel. Usually a bike that's a little bit more maneuverable than the other one. It's not just as intuitive on this model, however. On the Genius ST, the ST stands for Super Trail. So ironically, our Genius ST in the Scott lineup is actually built more for descending instead of being the short travel version of the bike. Once you get over that fact, however, they are pretty awesome bikes. This right here is the normal Genius, and it comes stock with 150 millimeters of travel in the rear, 160 millimeters of travel in the front, 2.6-inch Maxxis dissectors front and rear, an integrated cockpit, and then GX axis shifting. They're really, really sweet bikes. And this one, more notably, also has a lockout on it, which is and an internal for the internal rear shock as well as the fork, which is one of Scott's biggest things. They call it the twin lock, and it means you can lock out your fork via this dial right here, and then you can't see it, but there's also a dial inside the rear that is actuated by a cable that locks out the fork and the rear shock at the same time. They have a middle mode, which is more for which they call traction mode, which is meant for like climbing and things like that. And then there's a full lockout. Let's say you're on a gravel road, you're on pavement, you need to get to the trailhead, things like that. There is that full lockout. It is if you need it. And then fully released is just full open. You have all your suspension. It's pretty awesome. This does make for a bike that can handle the descents quite capably, because it means they can tune the shock to hold traction and take bigger hits without sacrificing on pedal efficiency, because when it's time to climb, you just hit that switch and you're in climb mode, which is really, really fun. This bike right here in a size medium has a 65.1 degree head angle, which is definitely trail bike range. It's not the slackest, it's not the steepest, it's fairly middle of the run in terms of a trail bike, but it is a big bike. The reach on this bike, when compared to other bikes from similar companies, has a little bit of a longer reach on it, but nothing too insane. And this is the Genius ST. It looks very, very similar to the standard Genius, and there is a reason for that. They both share the same frame. You may be asking yourself, what makes these bikes different in numbers if they both share the same frame? And that is due to these little two hidden things right there. That plastic ring right there and right there is actually part of the headset cups. So those are set inside of the frame, and the headset is set inside those. But they're not perfectly level, however. They are angled at a slight angle, so when you spin them or change them out, you can actually change the head tube angle, which is one of the biggest differences between this bike and the standard Genius. This bike right here, the Genius Super Trail, has a 63.9 degree head angle, so it is a significantly slacker bike than the standard Genius. Along with that, this bike also gets what they call the one lock or the track lock, not just the twin lock. So you actually see it loses the lockout off the fork, so the lockout is still there, but it's just for the rear shock now. This kind of cleans up your cockpit a little bit, and it allows you to use a lockout on the rear shock for climbing purposes, but it allows you to always have that fully open fork with this bike being more descent oriented in mind. It still uses a 2.6 dissector rear tire, just like the other Genius, but you might have noticed the front tire looks slightly different. They spec this one with a mini DHF front tire in 2.6, so it is same width tire, but is a little bit more of a beefier tread. Again, all pointing to this bike being a little bit more descent oriented. Overall, the geometries are similar except for that head angle and the wheelbase. The wheelbase on the Super Trail is almost a centimeter longer than the standard Genius in the same size range. We were looking at the size medium. They still both, however, have 4-piston brakes, a 200mm front loader, 180mm rear rotor. But honestly, Scott might get me for saying this, but I think I prefer the paint job on the ST also. I think the teal is really, really cool, and I really, really like the way it looks. Always been a fan of bright colored bikes. I think the ST itself is a very, very great feeling bike. I think the Genius, the standard Genius, of course, is a great feeling bike, but any gripes I might have had about the original Genius, I think were totally fixed on the Genius ST. The standard Genius definitely has its place in the biking world, but from the way I personally ride, I think I would definitely prefer to ride the Genius ST. With that little bit slacker head angle, being able to push it a little bit harder and farther in those descents, it's a super, super fun, well-rounded bike. Now, those might not seem like the biggest changes on paper, but how do they ride? Me and the 2 other employees here at Contender got the opportunity to ride these in St. George, and we all came to the conclusion that they are fairly different feeling bikes, but we like them both. The Genius Super Trail was not the best at climbing. With that little bit of a longer wheelbase and slacker heading, it felt like as you were climbing, you kind of had to watch the front wheel more. It tended to wander a little bit more, and you kind of had to manhandle it, I guess is a way to put it, just to keep that front wheel in control. So the standard Genius did do some technical climbing a little bit better just because it was easier to navigate. In the descents though, that is where the Super Trail really shined. It took everything that the normal Genius did not, and then just kind of expanded on it in a really great way. It was able to take jumps and drops really, really well. You could push it fast, it held its traction. It's a very, very overall fun bike. I think we all really liked both of the bikes, but I personally, and I think a lot of people agree with me, I think the Super Trail is really where the Genius shines. The standard Genius, I think, would be a great bike if you like to do more long day adventures and you want to do some more exploration. That's probably where the standard Genius would find, because you'd be able to tackle a broader range of terrain with it, while this one might feel a little bit heavy and cumbersome for a day like that. But if you like to push a little bit harder in the descents, the Genius Super Trail is super fun. Both bikes climbed, honestly, pretty impressively, considering how much travel they have. They both have 160 front and 150 rear. And then both bikes descending was a blast. I also liked the medium DHF on the Super Trail, just having a little bit more grip in the corners, but it was noticeable on something maybe a little bit more rolly or flat that the front did have some more rolling resistance for sure. If you guys want to try out either of these bikes, they are located here in Contender, Salt Lake City, or you can also visit us on our website if you have any questions at contenderbicycles.com. Feel free to give us a call or chat us on our website if you have any more questions. Thank you so much.